every layer of this, they took out 15% commission, or they took a booking fee of between 60 and 80 pounds. And it's very, very unclear exactly what services they're providing, no matter how much you kind of get into it. And a lot of them are taking an ongoing fee as we go. And the significant thing is also that these firms don't have a government contract. In fact, they're kind of outsourced 2 or 3 times. And when we went to look at it again even further, we found that many of them were actually linked together. They're owned by the same firms. One of them's based out of, they're based out of an accountancy firm in Bradford. A lot of them. We knocked on some doors. One of them said they were actually based at the offices of the Daily Telegraph in London. And we went there and they weren't there anymore. Although when we asked, they said they had been there previously.
Now, middlemen are making millions of pounds from asylum hotels by taking a cut every time a hotel room is booked, all adding to the huge £3 billion odd pounds a year bill that the taxpayer foots for housing asylum seekers. This has been revealed in an exclusive Sunday Times investigation. James Coney is the news project's editor for the paper and joins us now. Morning to you, James.
Good morning.
Now, tell us about this. Let's be clear, huge amounts of money involved, of course, and this is middlemen, not the hotel operators themselves.
Yeah, so we were quite intrigued to have a look at. The 2 reporters, Hugo Daniel and Laith Al-Khalaf, have done a really good job here of trying to unpick what goes on with the vast sums of money that's going into housing asylum seekers. Now, when these contracts are handed out, we know that they are given to 3 main firms, and that's all done through official government tenders, Serco, Mears, Clear Springs. They're all above board, vetted by the government. And then money ends up at hotels. Now, when we started asking hotels who were putting up asylum seekers how much money they were getting for the contracts, they were telling us it was between 40 to 80 pounds a night per asylum seeker. But we know from the government contracts that it's costing us 127 to 148 pounds per night. And we know that the big contractors who have their contracts handed out by the government are only getting they have an agreed profit margin of about 5%, which I think lots of people will agree is a perfectly reasonable amount of money to make for running a big business. So the question was, where did they go? And so Hugo Daniel and Laith Al-Khalaf spent quite a long time trying to unpick exactly what was going on here, and found that between the big contractors and the hotel owners, there were a series of middlemen, usually a couple of extra layers, who basically acted as booking agents, salesmen, kind of very vague services they seemed to offer. And at every layer of this, they took out 15% commission, or they took a booking fee of between 60 and 80 pounds. And it's very, very unclear exactly what services they're providing, no matter how much you kind of get into it. And a lot of them are taking an ongoing fee as we go. And the significant thing is also that these firms don't have a government contract. In fact, they're kind of outsourced 2 or 3 times. And when we went to look at it again even further, we found that many of them were actually linked together. They're owned by the same firms. One of them's based out of, they're based out of an accountancy firm in Bradford. A lot of them. We knocked on some doors. One of them said they were actually based at the offices of the Daily Telegraph in London. And we went there and they weren't there anymore. Although when we asked, they said they had been there previously. And what really resonated was that this came back to exactly the same principles of what happened during PPE, during the pandemic. And that was, if you wind back a couple of years ago, we started to have this migration crisis where we had lots and lots and lots of people coming into the country, and we didn't know where to put them, particularly when some of the checking centres had outbreaks of diphtheria. We had thousands of people that suddenly needed accommodation. And these people suddenly saw that as a business opportunity. They ramped up the number of hotels that they were involved with. They ramped up their sales process and saw a great opportunity here without being properly vetted by the government to suddenly start making some money.
And you talk of government, of course, there's been a change of government. And we remember Keir Starmer, when in opposition, actually at one of the election campaign debates, talking about this, saying, who's paying the hotel bills? You are. Are we going to do this forever? This is such an absurd position for the government to have got in. Well, it's now his issue to deal with. Are they going to? And if so, how?
Well, the government's Keir Starmer's spoken very clearly about the fact that what he wants to do is process many of the people staying in asylum hotels already. Now, under the previous government, we had about 50,000 people there staying in about 400 hotels. what we've got now, we're told, is about 35,000 staying in 250 hotels. But the bill hasn't got any lower. We still need to find short-term accommodation for these people. And so the government has got a very clear, and I think what we've been told from Labour this week is that they found the bill is even higher than the previous government estimated, or the National Audit Office used to estimate. So I think the first strategy from the government is going to be to process as many migrants as they possibly can. And of course, what we've also seen from the government is plans to cut down on the number of migrants coming into the country by cutting down on the gangs, and also trying to strike an agreement with the French government to send some migrants back.
And just on the contracts themselves, have we got sight? Have you had sight of them? Are they in the public domain?
The tender contracts from the main providers are in the public domain, but the ones between everything else underneath that isn't. They come under the guise of commercial agreements. The only way that we've been able to find them is because we spent a lot of time knocking on doors. We spent a lot of time talking to hotel owners. We had a very useful whistleblower who worked for one of the firms, who was so appalled at what one of the firms was doing that he was prepared to exchange a series of documents with us that he let us see. We also saw some hotel owners who exchanged correspondence that they'd had, who had recordings of conversations, so that we were able to then unwind each step of the process and exactly figure out what everyone was being offered and what everyone was accepting. But everything below the top level is basically an outsourced commercial agreement, which is, I would say, shrouded in mystery at the moment.
Well, thanks for shedding light on it, James. Good talking to you. That's James Coney, News Projects editor with the Sunday Times. And all that knocking on doors that James referred to has borne fruit. Summary of the story on page 1 and 2 this morning of the Sunday Times. Full investigation, page 13, and an editorial on the issue on page 20.